First of all, I can't see Congressman Walker, but he and I have been, I've appeared in front of him on occasion. At the time, he was the ranking member on the committee, and he protected me. So I want to thank him for that. The review of the report, I have the globalization portion, Chapter 6. It reminds me of my annual physical when I go visit my brother-in-law, who's a country doctor. Same advice. Manage stress, eat well, exercise. The report's the same as it was in the 80s, the same as the 90s, same as it was in 2002, and candidly, as Jeff has pointed out, same is today. Export controls, international competitiveness, remove barriers or protectionist practices abroad. Same story. And that little list associated with those three things happened to bump right up against Jeff's topic, and that is you have to balance national security concerns with the hope and expectation of growing your business. If you look at the aerospace industry as it was identified in 2002, there's a really glaring difference today. For example, in the top 10 firms they list, based on their dollar figures and gross revenue, if you looked at that list now, you'd have new firms like Kratos, L3, DynCorp, SAIC, Booz Allen. These are all aerospace industry firms as well. Those in advice giving. You'd also have new entrants like Kinetic, international firms like Finmeccanica, which bought DRS. Some of the things that the report had pointed out in 2002 as problems, meaning barriers of American firms growing abroad and sovereign entity concerns about acquiring firms abroad, have actually kind of gone full circle. And that is the firms that you see now that are international firms have really come from overseas into this part of the market because of the budgets and because of the wars we fight, this is the most lucrative defense and aerospace market in the world. And the barriers in terms of getting into the UK market have been replaced by dropping barriers to UK companies like BAE and Thales entering the American market. So you're really seeing a globalization, if you will, of the aerospace industry. Now, what comes with that is you have to address the export control issue. We're not talking about single products here. We're talking about major corporations like General Dynamics UK or BAE USA. They have this program, the Proxy Firm, and it's a rather interesting program in a sense that I'm BAE and a UK firm. I can set up a US firm, but it has to have a separate board, it has to have a separate management team, and I really can't know what's going on in it. Now, on the other hand, I have shareholders in the UK who'd like to know on a consolidated basis, what my performance in all my subsidiaries might be. Well, I'm allowed to report the numbers. I'm just not allowed to manage the numbers. The flip side is BAE USA basically can't really have much communication from a standpoint of technology, development, IP, et cetera, with its parent. And so you end up, I'm giving you the BAE example because it's easy to fall into the trap to justify the same rules for Singapore or the same rules for a Chinese company. But in fact, these rules apply to the second largest investor in the American aerospace industry and happens to be the UK. So in a sense, those rules have accommodated the need for managing national security and at the same time the need for bringing fresh ideas, fresh IP, and candidly fresh capital into this market. And as we fight wars with coalition partners, as Jeff mentioned earlier, we have an opportunity where, and I have this firsthand, where I've actually been at the table out at the range in Yuma where BAE UK is competing against BAE US. They're not doing it directly because BAE UK finds another American sub it can talk to, and it licenses its IP to them. And so I stroll in with a BAE UK IP that came out of the MOD. Sorry for all the acronyms. And we can throw in TISWIG and GWAT and everything. But on the range, and right across from me is the guys from Nashua, New Hampshire, and they look at my stuff and they go, that looks familiar. Well, it should. It came out of the UK, but I can't tell you where I got it. Well, we know where you got it. You got it from our parent. Well, no, that would be an export control violation. I can't tell you that. So at the end of the day, the system is a little bit Gilbert and Sullivan. But the purpose behind it is, it's got a major lofty purpose associated with it. the three items in 2002, the perennials, export control, this administration, by the way, I gave the recommendation for the 2002 report on execution, meaning today, because I sort of, David wanted me to basically not only look back, but also give it a grade. Execution, C+, B-. But you know what? In the export control world, in the national security world, that's not bad. As a Commerce Department alumni, you never win on national security. The only time I win in that is when I get to be further to the right of the national security guy on a panel like this. Otherwise, when Commerce and DOD and State get into a squabble over export control and licensing, the Commerce folks always advise the private company to go for a tie. Because at the end, national security trumps everything. And so it's how you present your application, how you ask for, if you need a license, who do you file with, and as he talks about the iron majors, who in the program really will allow you, because it ultimately ends up on DOD's desk if it's warfighting equipment, who's really going to be an advocate to let you sell it abroad. On the other categories of globalization, different world. You've got EADS filing a protest against Boeing for the air refueler contract. They filed and won, they filed and lost. At the end of the day, Boeing got it. Now in this report, we talk about subsidization, and we talk about how insidious that is. And yet everybody in this industry knows that we subsidize and the Europeans subsidize. We subsidize on the front end. The Europeans subsidize on the back end. Either way, a subsidy is a subsidy. In the report and other sections talk about the importance for driving the industrial base, maintaining essentially aerospace workers so that we have that ability to draw into that resource. We do that through subsidization. Now, subsidization is not a dirty word. What it is it's an investment in the national infrastructure. But we've got to kind of get over this thing about where everybody does it but us. Just like sovereign entities, we want to go buy a sovereign entity in let's say in Italy, and the Italians or the French say, no, you can't buy it. Well, what about CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States? Dubai Holdings, for example. They wanted to make an investment in the U.S., particularly in ports. They were literally run out of the country because of CFIUS. So there's got to be a balance here in this debate. In every one of these reports since the 80s and 90s, 2000, and even now, the sum of the report is, and it should be in Section 6, is that we recognize we have a national security interest. We recognize that we have to be competitive abroad, and we recognize that it's in our own best interest to both work with those who are in the same industry that we're in, who have the same goals that we have, but we have to do it in balance with the national security. And that is why I am pleased to say that the Obama administration has sort of discovered some Reagan administration initiatives. Not the one of breaking NASA up. That was one of ours. But they apparently have discovered that one too. And that, by the way, don't worry about it. That's not going to happen. But it's looking at the export control laws from a standpoint of competitiveness. The most recent point I can make is on the launch, on satellites, which is an industry that I've got a background in. The administration has finally asked for Commerce to be able to be the licensing authority and remove satellites off the MCTL and move them back over the commodity control list of Commerce. That has not been there since 1994, I think, roughly, when they lost that authority because of the accident in China and L'Oreal's transfer of critical technology to the Chinese. So there are a number of examples. The last thing I'll close on is Jeff mentioned the big procurement reform and the little procurement reform. The little procurement is COTS. We all talk about COTS, commercial off the shelf. My company does a lot of COTS. There's a phrase called COTS to MCOTS, meaning commercial off the shelf to militarized commercial off the shelf. That is a real industry. And it's there because of the big procurement problems. And just like any business, you find a niche in order to be able to sell to the customer who wants to buy your product. COTS is a robust part and has been a robust part of this conflict. It has saved lives, and finally, I hope they'll institutionalize that part of the program. On the big stuff, meaning the big procurement reform, you're not going to get big procurement reform in the eyes of those who handle procurement as long as you continue to put people in jail for making mistakes. And that's the standard. Anti-Deficiency Act, interpretations, political concerns about it. I'm not talking about somebody buying you dinner or buying you a drink. I'm talking about someone who wants to come in and talk to you about a requirement, and they can't talk to you except in a big industry day. And then at the industry day in the morning, there's 500 people. In the afternoon, invitation only, there's the 6 aerospace companies. That won't work. And what you have is the small guys who are the most innovative are leeching around the procurement system, and they're going basically directly either to the warfighter, to the Rapid Equipping Force, or to DARPA, and little by little they're eroding this infrastructure. But they have got to attack that system, because that system is, the word corrupt is not correct. The really problem with the system, it is incredibly anti-competitive for both our acquiring and our taxpayers as well as to the warfighter, and they're disserved by it. Thank you.